Guys, I'm going to be honest with you all. If you told me 5 years ago that an anime gacha game would turn out to be a global sensation, becoming one of the biggest and most talked about games of 2025, alongside heavy hitters like Clair Obscure, Expedition 33, Death Stranding 2, and Oblivion, I would have said you're crazy. Sure, this level of excitement and attention for a gacha game has happened before with Genshin Impact when it first came out, but that was because they had redefined what smartphone gaming was, offering basically a AAA experience on the palm of your fingers, changing people's perception of gacha games with its open world exploration, stunning visuals, and accessible gameplay. Not to mention it released during the pandemic, so its success was almost expected to happen. Umamusume, Pretty Derby on the other hand doesn't seem to have anything going for it on the surface to be a global sensation. It doesn't have any of the usual high fidelity and gameplay mechanics that you will associate with modern gacha games. Yes, it still has the typical waifu collector aspect, but aside from that, it's essentially just a management and racing sim, which isn't exactly the most exciting genre. And yet, everywhere you look, whether it's through memes, streamers, VTubers, or the entirety of the internet, the game has somehow captured everyone's attention. Literally just the other day, my uncle asked me if I have ever heard or seen the horse girl game because he saw my younger cousins playing it and he thought it was actual horse gambling, and you can already guess the excruciating amount of time I had to spend explaining it to him. He even tried playing it for a while and actually enjoyed it, which really shows the appeal of the game and how it could capture such a wide demographic. So what gives? How has a game about anime horse girls racing each other become so popular? That's why in this video, I wanted to talk about a few things that may or may not have contributed to the game's popularity, why it feels so fun to play, and what it might represent for other gacha games in the future, because there are quite a lot of fascinating things about this game that other companies could learn from. But before that, what is Umamusume Pretty Derby? Well, for the basic premise of the series itself, it's set in an alternate world where famous racehorses from our history are reborn as anthropomorphic anime horse girls, where they attend specialized schools like a Trusten Academy, and you as the player are responsible for training your chosen horse girl so that they can compete in races to not only become champions, but the best idols in the world. And yes, you heard me, I said idol, because after winning a race, the horse girls will always perform a full-blown concert on stage to celebrate their victory. And I know it sounds weird, so who was the geniuses behind this fever dream of a concept? That would be Cygames, the same company behind Grand Blue Fantasy, Shadowverse, and the Idolmaster series of games. In fact, some of the stat training mechanics used in the Umamusume game was directly inspired by their previous work on the Idolmaster games. However, despite their experience with gacha games and already having the framework for an idol training game, Cygames had issues with the release of the Umamusume game. It was essentially stuck in development hell for a good 4 years. Initially announced in 2016 to incredible fanfare, it was supposed to be released in 2018, but it got delayed until 2021. And normally this would kill the interest and relevancy of a new project, but the company was smart because they never planned on releasing just a game. They wanted an entire multimedia franchise to go with the Umamusume name, so they have released an anime, a spin-off manga, and they even have an official YouTube channel called Pakatu, where people can watch the actual voice actresses behind the horse girls, like Goshi playing games, singing, or doing other random stuff. And surprisingly, this actually worked as it not only kept interest for the series alive, but it allowed for the anticipation of the game to actually build up for years leading up to the Japanese launch of the game. Whether this was a stroke of marketing genius or pure luck, we'll never know, although it definitely helped the franchise to establish a solid foundation for future success and building their core fan base. It's no wonder the game has over 22 million downloads just from Asia alone, and Japan by itself has already earned Cygames well over $2.5 billion in lifetime revenue, which is insane. And with a global release, the game has consistently maintained a good player base, averaging around 40 to 50k players on Steam, with a peak of 80k. Who knows how much higher that number could get if we factor in mobile users as well. Star Wars Outlaws, Suicide Squad, Assassin's Creed Shadows, Concord, and Veilguard can only dream of having numbers like this. Of course, I can just keep spouting all the data and records of the game to describe its success, but that's not the point of this video. So how is it that a game with such a ridiculous premise and was seemingly an amalgamation of just random genres being thrown together works so well? The answer is quite simple, and there's actually some reasoning behind the concepts used in the game that not only makes sense from a design and gameplay perspective, but a cultural one as well. And what I mean is, the game itself is a combination of all the most significant elements from Japanese pop culture. Shocker, I know. but to be more specific, professional horse racing, which is a traditional activity that has over 150 years of history in Japan. Because unlike many other countries, horse racing in Japan is not just a niche sport or casual weekend betting pastime, it's a full-blown national phenomenon, with the Japan Cup being considered as one of the most prestigious races in not just Japan but on a global stage as well, having some of the highest prize pools and being able to draw in massive viewers every time it happens, so we can tell how serious they take horse racing. And not only that, because Japanese people have a tendency to idolize anything they like, they don't just bet on the horses, they follow and learn about them, get emotionally invested in their careers, whether it's their victories or defeats, and treat the horses with almost the same admiration as celebrities or pop idols. And Side Games understood that, so they took their existing cultural respect and passion in horse racing, reimagining it through a format that's uniquely familiar to Japanese audiences, which is anthropomorphism. Because in Japan, there's long been a cultural fascination with personifying and turning non-human entities, whether they're ships, countries, or in this case horses, into human-like, emotionally resonant and fully realized characters. And the most famous examples of series that apply this formula are probably Northernlion and Kandai Collection, both games where historical warships are reimagined as cute anime girls. But what makes Umamusume different is the sincerity and care in which Side Games handles the real-life horses, because they do actually get permission from the owners first before turning their horses into anime girls, while also making sure they retain the real-world storylines, personalities, rivalries, and legacies of the characters you play. Take Oguri Cat for instance, he was one of Japan's most beloved racehorses from the late 1980s, not just for its incredible performance, but for the story behind it. That's because Oguri did not come from a prestigious bloodline. He was considered a horse with a poor pedigree, raised in the countryside, and wasn't expected to be competitive at all. Yet against all odds, he rose to stardom, defeating more well-bred, high-profile rivals, and reviving the nation's interest in horse racing. What's even more remarkable is that he attracted a whole new demographic to the sport, especially young people and women, simply because they fell in love with his underdog story. In the game and anime, Oguri is portrayed as a soft-spoken and determined girl from the countryside who wants to win races to live up to the hopes of the people cheering her on. And just like the real horse, whenever she steps onto the track, she locks in and becomes an unstoppable force, a nod to Oguri's nickname in real life, the Grey Monster. There are even references to his legendary post-race appetite, which the character also shares. And fittingly, the spin-off anime starring her is even called Cinderella Grey, a perfect title for a horse who defied expectations and won the hearts of a nation. It's details like this that makes the characters in Umamusume so compelling. Who doesn't love a good rags to riches story? Then there's Haru, who is arguably even more iconic despite having never won a single race before. And the reason she became so popular in the first place was because during Japan's economic downturn in the early 2000s, she became a national symbol of perseverance and never giving up, a horse that has lost all her races, 113 to be exact, and yet she still kept running simply because she didn't run for glory, she simply loved the grind, which is such a motivational and inspiring message. And in a strange way, her constant defeats made her even more beloved. That's why she was affectionately nicknamed the Shining Star for losers everywhere. People even started to bet on her not because they thought she would win or to ridicule her, but because they genuinely wanted to support her. But also, there was a superstition among fans that losing a bet on Haru could protect you from car accidents. In Umamusume, Haru is portrayed exactly as you hope, cheerful, bubbly, sometimes clumsy, but always optimistic. Even when we see her losing, he never lingers on the defeat, but rather, he focuses on the spirit, determination, joy, and her belief that next time might just be the one where she wins. And what's really beautiful is how the internet has embraced her through memes and fan arts, because in a way she has been adopted by the online community as their collective daughter. Of course, I can't talk about iconic racehorses without mentioning Goatship. This horse was legendary not just for its talents, but for being completely and utterly unpredictable. You literally never knew what he was going to do in a race. Like for example, during the 2015 Takarazuka Kinen, where Goatship was the overwhelming favorite, he just threw the race. Why did he do that? Well, because the horse next to him at the starting gate was being noisy and he did not like it. That single act of defiance reportedly cost Japanese bettors around 12 billion yen. And that's just one of the many stories from his absolutely ridiculous career. There's so much bizarre lore surrounding Goatship that fans have joked he never once ran a race seriously because after retirement, he was examined and found to be in perfect health, with none of the typical signs of racing wear and tear associated with racing horses. Some even speculated that he only raced because he wanted to become a breeding stallion and just did not care about winning at all. That's the kind of unhinged energy we're talking about. Naturally, Umamusume leans into this aspect about goat shit because in the game and anime, she is chaos incarnate. She constantly ignores the trainer, choosing instead to play pranks on her teammates and doing literally anything but train. Yet she somehow still manages to pull off unbelievable victories when it counts. She's loud, unpredictable, and hilarious, so it's not surprising that Goshi became the face of the Umamusume official YouTube channel. And you see what I mean. This commitment to accuracy and the way side games adapt real-world details into the character. It turns anthropomorphism into more than just a gimmick. It's their way of taking something distant, technical, or impersonal, then transforming those aspects into something you can actually form emotional connections with, whether it's ships from Kantai Collection or the countries in Hetalia. The goal is to humanize the abstract. And with Umamusume, side games use that same approach to make players fall in love with the sport of horse racing, but it's not limited to just the characters. The world building of the franchise was insanely well done. Many elements of the anime were taken straight from real life, like the racetracks or locations. We can even see Moe statues or the Statue of Liberty with features of the horse girls, and they even went further with this, showing us how this is a world where horse girls are normal, traffic lanes designed specifically for them, and telephones or chairs that are designed according to their physiology. This attention to detail paired with the amount of care they put into turning the horses into in-depth and flushed out characters. Umamusume does what very few gacha games could, make people appreciate not just the horse girls, but the world of horse racing along with the real-life horses as well. And it does so by cleverly bridging Japan's love for horse racing, its cultural tradition of anthropomorphism, and its unmatched ability to tell emotionally resonant stories through character and world building. That said, none of the stuff I mentioned would matter if the game itself wasn't good or fun, because having an amazing narrative, high immersion, and cute characters can only carry you so far if the gameplay is dull. Surprisingly though, Umamusume's core gameplay loop, which is the career mode, is deceptively simple, but brutally effective at getting people addicted. When you choose one of the many horse girls in the game, you're introduced to 5 core stats that you need to train, but you're not just mindlessly tapping buttons. You have to plan out their daily routines, respond to character events, make decisions about training intensity, and manage their energy, all within a limited number of turns. It's basically a cross between a roguelike, a sports management sim, and weirdly enough a dating sim. And somehow it works. But here's the kicker though, after all that training and your efforts are finally put to the test when race day finally comes, even though you have no control over the actions of your horse girls and you're just sitting there watching her race, it actually feels exciting. That's because you can be losing halfway through a race and then suddenly, your horse girl activates her special skill, allowing her to blast through the field in a surprise comeback, and it's thanks to all these random and unpredictable moments that makes it feel more dynamic and unscripted, even getting me emotional, which is a feeling I don't usually get from playing gacha games. Like, I still remember my first win at career mode using Oguri Cap, because early on everything was going wrong. My training will often fail, her mood keeps dropping, and almost every race, we could only get top 3 finishes. But then when it mattered the most during the URA qualifiers, even though she was the 5th favorite, she was able to make a comeback to get first place. Then we move on to the semi-finals that she won, and we somehow made it to the finals. This run, where I had zero faith in, but Oguri made it happen and she went on to win everything. That's the kind of storyline the game creates organically. But that's not even the most addicting part, because eventually, having completed career mode, your horse girl will retire just like real life, leaving a legacy to the ones who come after. And this aspect is where the roguelike element comes into, the inheritance system. And even though each of the run you play are self-contained, the strengths, abilities, and aptitudes of your horse girls can be used in the next run, allowing you to create progressively stronger and more refined runners. And that's how the game hooks you, because you're not just playing to win, but you're essentially trying to build greatness through run after run and generation after generation of horses, which is really such a smart way to adapt the breeding aspect of real life horses. And don't get me started on that entire can of worms. Just Google Sunday Silent Children and you'll see just how insane the family trees of real life horses can get. But honestly, this loop is so tight and rewarding. I literally wasted hours theory crafting and planning so that I can create the perfect horse girl through careful pairings and inheritance paths. Although I do hate the RNG system, because I have still yet to produce a single 3-star spark. Moving on, the horse girls and the legacy system are only part of what makes Umamusume feel unique. The other key factor is the deck of support cards you bring into a playthrough. As for what they are, think of support cards as your training squad. They are like friends, rivals, or mentors who help shape your horse girl's development throughout her career. And each card provides specific bonuses like stat boosts, improved training efficiency, unlockable skills, or buffs for certain racetracks. So depending on which cards you bring, the run can feel completely different even with the same character. And to get the support cards, we have to talk about the gacha system, the part that usually turns people off from mobile games, but surprisingly, Umamusume handles it much better than most. That's because unlike games like Genshin Impact or Fate Grand Order, where you are constantly rolling for powerful characters or weapons, Umamusume separates that pressure. Yes, there's still a gacha pool for horse girls, but they're not essential to winning, and you mostly roll for them if you like their designs or personalities, not because you need them to progress. What really matters though are still the support cards, and even then, the game is surprisingly free-to-play friendly. And what I mean by this though, I do admit that having SSR cards will definitely make runs easier, but the game still remains totally playable and competitive even without them, and you could actually create a decent deck just with SR cards. But what's even more interesting is how Umamusume might be setting a new standard for gacha games going forward. For example, developers might start learning from the way Umamusume handles its monetization, because the game doesn't really punish players for not keeping up with the meta, unlike Genshin Impact where you often have to pull for a specific character, then get their signature weapons and sometimes even duplicates just to make them more viable. Umamusume, on the other hand, feels much more forgiving, and so far it hasn't created any artificial bottlenecks or frustrating paywalls just to push people into spending. Of course, that might just be wishful thinking since most gacha games are still extremely predatory, and Umamusume is more the exception than the rule. Now, what I do think other developers might realistically take away is the platform strategy, because Umamusume proved that launching a proper PC version and bringing it to Steam can help a game to reach a much wider audience, and it can be a more accessible gateway into global markets as well. At this point, it's safe to say that Umamusume has become more than just a simple gacha game. It's a cultural phenomenon, one that has managed to do something no one really expected: revive mainstream interest, especially among the younger generations, for horse racing, not just in Japan but globally as well. I mean, just look at the internet. People who got into Umamusume initially for the anime girls are now watching actual racers. They are even sharing information on current, retired and deceased racehorses, their stories and what is happening in the horse racing world. Just the other day, I saw people donating ryegrass to feed Harurara, and apparently, she now has over 2.5 metric tons of ryegrass, which is insane. But yeah, that's not just a side effect, that's the full-blown Umamusume magic. Because side games doesn't treat the horses like mascots or marketing tools, they regard them as legends. I mean, the parent company of side games, CyberAgent, has even gone out of its way to support the racing industry directly. They partner with real racecourses, collaborated with racing associations to improve the sport, donating to horse farms, and even work with international tournaments like the Kentucky Derby and Grand Prix de Paris to promote Umamusume, which is honestly kind of hilarious when you think about anime horse girls invading a real horse race. That's a timeline I definitely never expected. Even the CEO, Susumu Fujita, is fully invested, and I mean that literally. He owns a team of racehorses, reportedly spending over $25 million on them, and one of his top horses, Forever Young, is now considered as one of the most successful dirt horses in the world. So yes, the impact of this game isn't just digital, it's funding the next generation of actual racing legends, but also taking care of the previous one. It's something that you don't really often see anywhere else in modern media, taking gacha money and funneling that for the betterment of the industry. At the end of the day, Umamusume Pretty Derby is a weird idea that should not have worked, especially outside of Japan, because it's niche, it's hyper-specific and it's deeply Japan-coded. But it did work not because it followed trends, but because the developers believe in their own concepts. Also, it didn't mock its source material, it celebrated it, and most importantly, it respects the player, which is more than I can say for most AAA games. So through all of that, Umamusume has built something rare, which is a game that's not just popular but meaningful. But yeah, that's Umamusume Pretty Derby. I hope I was able to explain how this game became so popular and essentially took over the world. I really do appreciate you watching to the end, and again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.